G'day, this is Harney from Digital Logic, and today we're excited to bring to you the DJI Ronin 3-axis camera stabilisation system. There's been a lot of anticipation for such a product, made fairly famously by the free-fly systems, especially the Movi M10 and M5. Today we've got a C300 with a 35mm Cine Prime. We're also using the Redrock micro wireless follow focus system. We've also got another system here that we're going to build up today, and we're going to go through the setup of putting a lens on here, putting all the items you need, the battery, the memory, make sure you've got absolutely everything that you are going to use on that camera system, balance that, work out roughly where the center of gravity is, put the bridge plate on, dovetail plate, and then put it on the system, and then we're going to go through step by step the process as described through the DJI Ronin manual and basically get the system balanced. Now, when we received this unit last week, we opened it up with some great anticipation, and we found out there was no manual in there, and we figured, okay, this is the way it comes. You don't need a manual, it's quite easy. So we did attempt to try and balance it on our own, having limited experience with such gimbals, and we found it was a bit more challenging. I mean, just trying to learn what the terms are, you know, the deadband, stiffness, and some of these other wordings or definitions they use when we were playing with the settings on the iPhone. We didn't really understand what the result of changing those settings were. Now, since then, we've downloaded the DJI manual, which is quite easy to download off their website. It's not a very big read, really. I think I read in about an hour. And then you can easily identify or understand what the definitions are and what each setting does. So I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like reading the manual because we're professionals, don't need to read a manual. So for those people, they love watching videos. That's what we do here, we make videos. So we're going to go through the process so you won't have to read the manual as we did. And I suppose there's some tips and tricks or things that we learn along the way that we'll try and comment on those as well. So let's begin. We'll start with the camera, and we'll start building up the camera rig, and we'll move on to the next step. So the first thing we want to do when you've got the camera system, you basically want to take off anything that you won't need. Now, in particular the C300, the monitor and the audio system can be detached, and that's the first thing that we will do because it's something that we won't need. And actually, we need to do so because although the Ronin itself has a weight of 4.2 kilos, the payload it can support is 7 kilos, but there's an issue with the dimension, the maximum dimension that it can take. And at the moment, the total height from the bottom of the camera to the top is what they recommend is 225 millimeters, with a center of gravity of no more than 140 millimeters from the base of the camera to the center of gravity. And the width, total width or depth is 195 mil. Now, it's not to say that you can't get a camera balance that exceeds these dimensions, but this is sort of their recommendation, and it gives you an idea of the sort of volume that the camera system should take. So we want to try and fit it in within that. And I suppose the reason why they give you those dimensions is so the clearances can be acceptable through the gimbal. So we're going to take this monitor off. Untouch those, we're not going to need that. We're going to use a separate monitor. In this particular case, we're using the small HT DP6, but you can use many other monitors. What we're also going to take on this camera is this viewfinder eye cover can come off as well. So there's just a release thing that you turn here, and we can get rid of this. So we're going to try and do that with this as well. Comes off. Again, you don't need it while it's on there, and it just minimises the dimensions of the block of the camera. So we get rid of that. We also don't need on this particular one the handle. You can control the menu here as well. So we don't need that handle. So we're going to remove that. Now, cameras like the Scarlett or the Epic, as you know, are quite boxy in shape. So they really provide a nice platform to start with for using with these gimbals. So that's the bare bones camera. We've put a larger size battery in there. We want to make sure we've got media in there as well. If you're going to use 1 or 2, put the 2 in there. Every gram should be accounted for. And now we're going to put a lens on there. So we're going to use this 35mm Cine Prime. So we'll take the cap off. Actually, we'll take the cap off later, but at the end of the day, you'll have to take the cap off to do the balance. So I'll put that lens on there now, like so. And just before we do the balancing, I'll take the front cap off. Okay, so once you've put your lens on there and you've loaded the camera up with the memory and battery, the next thing we're going to do is mount the Dovetail or camera sliding base plate that comes with the Ronin. Now, when we lined it up the first day we got it, we did find that they wouldn't all line up exactly. They were just a little bit out, to be honest. And so what we ended up doing is drilling some of the holes slightly larger, just to give us a bit more opportunity to install a second screw to stop any sort of sliding motion, because you really want to minimize any sort of movement when it's on the gimbal. So by doing that, we have been able to put a 3/8 screw and a 1/4 20 in there, and that's what I'm going to install now. Now the screws, the Allen keys, basically everything that you need comes with a DJI Ronin. So there's a 3/8 screw. It's actually the same screws that come with the red. So I'll just screw that in. Need to put that there. So that's now secure on the base of the camera. Because I've already done a balance on this, and I know I'm going to put the motor and the follow focus receiver unit, I have pushed the camera back. Now sometimes when you do that yourself, you'll have to do a bit of trial and error and work out where the optimal space is. But there's plenty of opportunity to set the camera anywhere along that base plate. The next thing is it comes with a couple of 6 pieces of iris rod that have a male and female end, so it allows you to extend the iris rods. So depending on what length you need. I'm going to use 2 pieces is all we need for this rig. Compact, or the prime lens is quite short. So, and these just basically screw in. Now obviously if you're using something like a DSLR, it's probably a simpler setup to start with. But you know, if you want to control focus, then this is the sort of setup you're going to need to go for. Hopefully that should be okay. So the next thing we're going to do is install the Redrock micro wireless follow focus system. So we want to make sure we've basically got everything on the camera that we need before we start to put it on the gimbal and do the balancing. So I'll slide this motor on, and that goes onto there. Lock that off. And this is the receiver. Now I'm using the Redrock micro 15mm clamps, which will work quite nicely with this. So I'm going to slide that onto there. I'm going to put that out of the way. Cable's going to come out of there. I think that'll work. Let's see how that goes. So really that's all the physical components I'm going to put on there. There might be some adjusting in position or orientation once I put it on the rig and work out if it's going to come into interaction with anything else, basically. If it's going to collide with anything, we'll have to readjust it. So I'll slide that. I removed the lever, and now it's sliding on. Now if I just slide it backwards so I can feel where the center point is. Still tilting forward. So what I might do, this can still a bit front heavy. Let me take that off. So what I've done now is had to change the orientation of the micro remote base station. It was turned in a different direction and it was putting a lot of front weight, and I just couldn't get it back further enough. So by changing the orientation, I've been able to then now get it sort of balanced. It's not tipping over backwards, it's not tipping over forwards, it's sort of sitting in the middle. Yes, we got some roll axis we haven't adjusted yet, but you can see now it's sort of sitting in the middle of that. So that's okay. I'll remove this Velcro as well, just to sort of let it go where it wants to go. Okay, get rid of that for now. So yeah, so look, every camera setup's going to be slightly different. You're going to need to work out, depending on what you're putting on there, what sort of adjustments you're going to need to make to get it to balance. So this now in the tilt axis is okay. After balancing the tilt axis, which is this axis this way, the next thing is to do the roll axis. And the roll axis is what? This is the roll axis. And to do that, the way you do that is basically there's these two red knobs here that you'll loosen. Don't go too far, but just loosen the pressure off, and then it will allow this whole carriage to move left and right. And by adjusting that, really small amounts, you'll find at the moment it's leaning this way. It'll basically counteract that and sort of get it to go level is what we're trying to achieve. So let's do that now by loosening that up. Now you'll notice I haven't put all the cables in here yet. The cables will affect it slightly, but it's not going to make a huge difference in that I should be able to, once I put all the cables in at the end, to make some finer adjustments. The reason why I'm not putting it in there now, it really basically obscures a lot of the controls that I need to get to. So that's why I'm leaving it till the end. So I'll loosen that up. I've had to, again, tweak this a little bit to the right just to clear the knobs. So if I see it now, it's a little bit to the right. I'm going to take it a bit to the left. A little bit more. And really just moving it a couple of millimeters to touch more. And I think that's pretty close. Probably gone a bit too far actually, so I'll bring it back just a touch. And it is really quite sensitive. There you go. That's pretty good now. So I'm going to lock that off, turn these knobs back. Now there will be some readjusting again later, so you'll find we will come back to those knobs again, but this is really the first pass. Okay, so after we've done that, now we're going to do the vertical tilt. So we've done now the tilt, the roll, and now the vertical tilt is this axis here. So basically at the moment, if you lift this up and let it go, you see how it falls? Same as if you go this way and drop it down, it falls. And basically what we want to do is be able to hold the camera upright and it will stay there. And you can do that by loosening these two red levers on each side and sliding this whole platform up and down. And basically what it's doing, it's getting the center of gravity of the camera and getting it to the center axis of the gimbal. So let me loosen that up. It's easier if I just face it towards me and just slide it up. At the moment it's falling. And basically getting this to basically, you know, just sort of slow movements, not basically drop. Like as you'll see if I loosen this up and I just move it a couple of mils down, you'll see when I lock these off, it'll just chops over pretty quick. So I'll just bring it back probably half of that distance back to get the final adjustment there. You see it sort of stays there now. That's okay. Basically when there's no, you can basically put it in whatever position and it doesn't drop over or it doesn't, you know, have to swing back. It sort of sits wherever you put it and it's pretty happy to stay there. It gets little movements, but that's okay. So we've done the tilt, which was this axis here. We've done the roll, which was this one. And then we did the vertical tilt, which was adjusting these levers and moving the whole system forward or backwards. Now I haven't installed any cables yet. One more thing that we'll look at is the pan axis. And the pan axis is basically where these red levers sit up in the back here, and there's these dials that you'll turn. And what you're trying to achieve there is basically, if you lift one handle up, you'll just want to see if it's going to force the unit to swivel around. So if I lift this up, you see how then it came towards me. So by adjusting this forwards and back, you basically can lift one side of the handle and you won't get too much movement in this side in the pan. So I'll loosen this up and I will turn this, say, a quarter turn, say there. I'm not going to lock them off yet. I just want to see if I lift this up, does it get worse or less? Okay, so I'm going to do another quarter turn. Let's have a look at that. Let's see what behavior we get. So if I do another, say, quarter turn, and I lift this up, you see how it's not reacting anymore? It's quite slow now. You do the same on this end. If you put it back in the middle and lift this up, you get very slow reaction, so which is pretty good. So I might go just a touch more, not too much more. And I'll try that again. Yeah, that's pretty good. It's not. You'll notice if you turn it, say, the other way, you'll lift it and it'll basically just fly to the other end. So you'll find if I go too far, it'll start to go quick again. You start speeding up again. So it was somewhere in between there. I'll take it back. That's pretty good. So I'll lock that off there. I'm happy with that. Now finally, there's something called an advanced roll axis, which is this component here. Now the only time you need to use that or make that adjustment using the Allen wrenches is if you're using quite a light camera in comparison to, say, the motor that's on the unit. So if you're using something like a Sony A7S, then you may need to offset this whole axis here, because what will happen is you'll move the camera all the way to the end and you won't have anywhere to go. So by adjusting this to some small movements in this, it offsets the whole stage from here on, and that'll be enough to get it balanced again. So look, I think you'll know when that happens. You'll just get to the point where you'll slide this all the way and you won't have any more room to move, and then you'll have to go back and loosen this up. And it's basically just, remember, there's 2 screws at the top, 2 at the bottom, and 1 in the middle, and that'll allow that to loosen up. So now that we've done that, the next thing is basically go and put all the cabling in and do some fine adjustments if we need to. With the software as well, it will tell you with the view on the menu, if you get a reading higher than 10, you'll know that it's working a lot harder than it needs to, and it may need some more adjustment. So I'll just show you the battery quickly. The battery is quite similar to the units that's on the new Phantom 2s. It is a very different battery. This supplies 14.8 volts, so that you can provide DTAP or PTAP 12 volt out of these units. So don't assume that these are the same batteries, or even the chargers, they're quite different. So in terms of putting these batteries in, you basically just loosen these 2 little screws here, and you hook it into here and push down on it. Just watch your finger doesn't pull on that. That's the eject module. So you click that in and you'll hear it. Now you have to pull it off, or to remove it, you basically push on this and that lifts it out. So I'll just put that back in again. So that's on. And in terms of powering the unit up, I'll just power it on just so you can see what it does. You basically click it once and you click it again for 2 seconds and hold. So if I press once and then click again and hold, it'll ramp up and power on, and give it a few seconds and you'll see that it will try to, there it is. So even at this early stage, you basically can pick it up and it is doing its job. We don't know what all the settings are yet, but it's starting to work. So I'll put that on there. What I'll end up doing is put all the cables next, see if I need to make any finer adjustments. To turn it off, by the way, you just basically click and hold. You don't need to do the double click. That turns it off. So now what I'll do is wire it up, and like I said to you before, try to use lightweight cables where you can. Sometimes you don't get the choice, but see how you go. So we're going to use the PTAP port on the unit of the base here to power the wireless focus system. There is one at the front and there is one at the rear as well. So you can find one here as well. That's the one I'm going to use. That's the motor. So we've connected all the cables up, and we also want to make sure, use some Velcro or some way to secure the cables so they're not shifting the center of gravity when the unit's in operation. So I'm going to use these Redrock micro cable clips, and they basically clip on to 15mm rods. So if I can push the cables into here and basically clamp on to that 15mm rod there, basically keeps the cables from swinging. That's all we're trying to do. So yep, that's good. Now I'll check the balance again and just see how that's performing. So I might have to adjust the vertical tilt. It's falling a bit too quick, so I'm going to just adjust the vertical tilt here. Again, after putting those cables on, I might have to just lift this up a little bit. It's falling down, so I just mill forward. That's better. So that was a fraction of a mil. So let's turn that on now. I think we're okay. We'll just run the SDI cable. We'll use this right angle adapter, so that cable can just come out the back to get a feed to the monitor. So there's the SDI cable. What we might do now, we've fed the monitor into here, and we can see what we're shooting. We've got the wireless remote follow focus for the operator to control that. There are also options that DJI do, the light bridge, which is this unit here, which is a digital wireless video system, which can just, double-sided tape or Velcro to the bottom here. It can feed power. It's got its own light bridge port that can power this unit. And then the receiver is this unit here, which has its own built-in battery. Again, you click once, click again to hold it, turns on, and that can feed a HDMI monitor. Line of sight is 1.7 Ks, so probably adequate for most people. There are obviously many other sort of Teradex, Paralinks and others that can be used also. So the next thing really is to go through the software and just have a look at some of the settings. The first thing you do, when you first put the unit on, the first thing to do is a calibrate. And the only time you need to do that is really if you're changing a lens or changing some camera configuration. So I've installed the software on my iPhone, and we'll just have a quick look at some of the settings on that. So it's a DJI Assistant software, and the first thing you do to go in there, it's going to scan and try to find the DJI. Now it's not on, so I'll turn it on, and you should see that come on. It's popped up there, so you can just select that and it will bind to it or connect to it. And then it's come on. You also get these green and blue lights of communication that tells you that you've got it. You can click on the wizard and it goes back and just gives you the most common settings that you need to quickly get access to. And in there, you can hit the calibrate option. This is what I was talking about, the view here actually. It talks about the power. So you can see the settings, 1, 6, 8, 7. So as long as it's less than 10 for most of the part, it will fluctuate, but that's okay. So you're pretty close. If you go to Calibrate System, that's the first thing we do after setting up a new camera rig. So if I run that, it's going to go through and calibrate the system. So it's trying to work out the stiffness and some of the parameters, the deadband, and it will try and populate a bunch of information to start off with. And 90% of the time it's going to work fine. Depending on the shot you want to do, you may then go back and tweak it a bit, and once you get familiar with the definitions and the terms of what they do and how they cause the gimbal to act differently. So it only takes less than a minute, 30 seconds or so. You'll find this thing will complete the calibration. Just to note, they do also provide a lens support bracket, and it should be used if you're using Canon lens, Pro Series lens, or something that way. If there's any sort of movement in the lens, this lens and the camera's got to act as one unit. So they recommend using this to make sure the whole thing is sturdy and there's no vibration different from the body and the lens. So you can see it tilted forward there. It's part of the calibration. It'll come back up once it's finished. Okay, it's come back and that's finished. So again, once we do that, you can go back to the gimbal and there's all these different settings, deadband. You can see the results there, all the values, and you can go through and adjust a lot of these settings. So what I'm going to go through now is, say, one parameter is called the deadband. Now, if you go to smooth track under the gimbal, you'll see the pan axis, you've got deadband at 90. If you click in there, let's just say I go to 0 and right, that applies it. Now, if I pick it up, you'll see this is the most direct control of the axis. It pretty much follows as soon as you turn the handles. It's fairly direct. Now, if I'm going to make another adjustment, this time I'll bring the deadband to say 50. Let's say 55, we'll write that. And now have a look. You'll get quite a delay from when you move your hands right or left. Probably a bit too much. Yeah. You can see it's too much deadband. I've increased it way too much that it's hardly, the deadband range is so high that it's not even seeing any reaction from it. So let me bring that back down. Just say 10 or 12, 11. Let me write that. We're at 11 now. Pick that up again. You see my hand moves and then it follows. That's the deadband. This is under the smooth track settings. What I'll also go through is with the remote. Turn the remote on that comes with the unit. I'll just put a sticker here to label what the different settings are. So the first one on this mode button is position 1 is free, smooth track off. Then P2 is free, smooth track on. So a smooth track at the moment is off, that switch is off. When I pick it up and I go left and right, see how there's no smoothing? But if I flick that switch on to position 2 and now move it, the smooth track is on. So now it follows and smooths the track shot. The final setting, the final position is return to center, smooth track on. So at the moment on the second, if I go right and let go, it stays there. Left, stays there. If I go to the position mode 3, it's return to center. So it always goes back to the center position. So if I go right and let go of it, it'll make its way to center. The tilt is not, the tilt is independent. So if you move it up or down, it'll just stay locked on that angle that you're trying to hold. Now the other feature we've got also is the function button, and there's 3 positions, and each one of those positions is fast, normal or slow. Under the settings on the iPhone app, if you go to settings, you've got fast, normal or slow, and they correspond with the 3 positions on the remote control. So you can set what fast is at the moment, so at 100%, normal at 60 and slow at 30, but you can adjust and preset those, and then the remote positions will apply those to the gimbal. So the other feature is really good is if you find the thing is jittery or there seems to be some load on the motors, to kill the motors, you can do it on the software, but you can also do it with the remote. By flicking the switch 3 times really quick left from the bottom, isolate that switch, you'll see that that's now killed the motors and that thing's free to go wherever. There's no resistance. To reactivate the motors, again, you do the same thing again by clicking this 3 times and then it comes good again. So that's a handy feature to have, especially not needing to go to the iPhone all the time to do that. So back in the DJI Assistant software, if you go under the gimbal and then go more, you'll get a briefcase mode turned on or off. So there's the briefcase mode. By default, well, if you turn it on, it's fine to leave on. It just knows when you turn it onto its side that wants to activate the briefcase mode, and I'll show you that in a minute. There's the kill motor option again that we used on the remote by isolating that switch. The same option can be turned on with the iPhone. But like I said, it can be just as quick to do it with the remote to turn it on and isolate that function button. So with briefcase mode on, you can leave it on if that's what you want to do. I'll just show you how that works. You basically grab it. They say it's good for doorways or narrow spots. You basically pick it up and just drop one handle and then it will come to briefcase mode. That's briefcase mode. To bring it back, just pick up the second handle, bring it up, give it a second, and it will come back. That's in normal mode. And so to go to upright mode, basically tilt forward 180. There you go. Now you need some help to basically get it around. Do this with an assistant. I wouldn't try it on your own, but there you go. And they get you to get that sort of high level shots. And again, to bring it back down, comes back. I'm just going to put that back on the stand. So come on down to Digital Logic. We have both the DJI Ronin in sales and rentals, and we usually keep one demo model available for customers to try. As DJI would say, free yourself, be a warrior.